Hey, what's going on, guys? So my initial plan was to create a Laravel crash course, about an hour, hour and a half, but I ended up doing a project that took a lot more time than that. So this will be a free 4-hour course slash project, and we're going to be building a job listing application from scratch using Laravel 9 and MySQL. So Laravel is a PHP framework. It's honestly one of, if not my favorite framework. It just includes so much and makes it easy to do just about anything. And we will stop and look at things outside of the scope of the project that we'll be building, just so I can kind of show you how things work. Now, I know that these days it's all about quick content, YouTube shorts and TikTok and so on. That's definitely not my style. So when you watch something like this, I would suggest that you sit down in a quiet place and code along with me and actually build something and immerse yourself into learning. And this might take you a week, it might take you a month or even longer, and that's absolutely fine. If you get stuck, just stop and search Google, search Stack Overflow, find answers in the comments. Just don't give up. And this project will give you a really great foundation in PHP and Laravel web development. And I'll give you a quick demo of the final project, and then we'll go ahead and get started. And I hope you guys enjoy. This Laravel crash course is sponsored by Linode. Linode is one of the most reputable cloud companies and can be used for almost any type of project. Many cloud hosting companies can get really expensive really quick, and one of the great things about Linode is their monthly caps, which keeps your bill predictable. For example, the base plan is 3 cents per hour with a monthly cap of $20, so you don't end up racking up all these unexpected charges. Their control panel makes it easy to deploy and manage your projects. You have complete freedom to install anything you want. You can customize your production environment and also get 24/7 email and phone support. So if you want to try Linode absolutely free, I'm giving out a link with $100 60-day credit. You can visit linode.com/Traversy or click the link in the description. All right, so I just want to give you a quick demo of the project. It's called Laragigs. It's basically a place to post Laravel gigs or jobs, listings, whatever you want to call them. And as you can see, we have registration and login. So user authentication, we'll be implementing this after. And all of our forms have validation, as you can see. And then we have this hero image, which will just, or hero area, where it just takes us to the register page. And then we can filter listings as well. So basically we have tags that we can add. And if I click on one of these like view, then it's going to show me all the listings that have the view tag. And then we have a filter search here, or an input, where we can search for whatever we want. So we'll say like senior. And then anything that has senior in either the title, the description, or the tags is going to show up here. All right, we're also going to implement pagination, as you can see here, which is pretty easy with Laravel. The theme that you're looking at, like the design, I have that in the GitHub repo. So here you'll see Laragigs theme. This is all the HTML files. Okay, so at some points we're going to just grab some of the HTML from here and bring it over. And we're using Tailwind, so it's just classes. There's no custom CSS or anything like that. Now, as far as the single listings, if I click on this, you'll see the image. Actually, let's use a better example. Because we will be creating what's called a factory that will allow us to seed listings. So all of these, with like the weird names, we just simply run a command and it puts those in our database just for development. But let's look at like this listing here. So we have an image, we have the position, we have the company name, the tags, the location, the description, and then you also enter the contact email for this button and then the website or application URL for this button here. Okay, so that's a single listing. Now, if I go to post a job, I have to log in because you do have to be authenticated in order to post listings. Okay, so I do that. I'll see this "you are logged in," which will disappear. We're going to be using something called Alpine.js to do that, to have that interactive type functionality. And then up here, you'll see it says welcome and then our name. We have a manage listings. If I click on that, it shows us all of our gigs or listings. And from here, we can edit them. Okay, we have file upload as well. And if we go back, we can also delete. All right, so let's just create a post. Now that I'm logged in, we'll just call this test test listing, and we'll say Laravel developer and location, contact email, URL. Let's just do like, we'll just say Acme. And then we have these tags, which are comma separated values, and then a logo. So I'll just grab the Acme logo, and then description, we'll just say the job description, and click create gig. We get a message up here, listing created successfully, and you can see our new listing. All right, and if I go to my manage listings page, you'll see that down here. I can edit it, and I can also delete it. All right, now go ahead and log out. We get our flash message. So the functionality is pretty simple overall, but this is going to give you a really great foundation into building Laravel projects, where you'll learn how to do authentication and CRUD functionality, filtering, pagination, creating database seeders and all that. We will be using MySQL for our database, but if you don't want to install MySQL and get that set up, you could use something like SQLite. So it's up to you. Again, we're going to kind of take things slow and really learn how things work. So hopefully you guys enjoy this, and let's get started. All right, guys, so the very first thing we need to do is get set up so we can run Laravel on our local machine. So you need a development environment. Now, this is one of the tough things about making Laravel tutorials, because I'm someone that always likes to start from absolute scratch. And it's tough to do that with Laravel because there's so many different ways to get set up, and it can be different on, if you're on Windows or if you're on Mac. So it can be tough. So what I'm using is something called Laravel Valet, which is, as you can see here, it's a development environment for Mac OS minimalists. And it basically just allows you to declare a certain directory as for your projects, for your Laravel projects, and then you get a local domain like whatever, mywebsite.test, and that will, that'll be your Laravel site or your local site. But again, it's only for Mac. You can't use it on Windows. So for Windows, what I usually recommend for beginners is XAMPP or XAMPP. And this gives you Apache, which is a web server. It gives you PHP, MySQL, which we will be using in this course, PHPMyAdmin. So it's one installation, and it gives you a complete environment. And it's great on Windows. On Mac, I usually run into issues. I mean, it could just be me, I don't know, but I usually wouldn't suggest it for Mac users. But again, for Windows, it's pretty good. Now, I do have a gist. I have links to gists in the description. I have one to get set up with Valet on a Mac. So it just takes you through the steps: install Homebrew, install PHP. You need to install Composer, and then Valet, then the Laravel installer, and then you can simply run Laravel new and then your project name. I also have a gist for XAMPP, and this is for Windows and Mac. So install XAMPP, install Composer, and then you need to set up what's called a virtual host, and you do that with in these specific files for both Mac and Windows. All right, so I mean, it's up to you on what you want to use. There's also a project called Homestead, which is actually a Vagrant box. So it's a virtual machine. It includes all this different software. This is a really good option once you really know what you're doing, but I don't think it's good for beginners. So if you're just getting started with Laravel and with Apache and Nginx servers and all that, I wouldn't really suggest Homestead, but it's up to you. And then I also have a link in the description to this MySQL cheat sheet, because we will be dealing with a MySQL database later on. Okay, and if you use XAMPP, then you get that MySQL installed with the software suite. All right, so for me, I'm going to go ahead and get started by just in my sites directory here, and I have Valet already installed, and I don't think I have the Laravel installer set up. So I'm going to just run Composer global require Laravel / installer. All right, actually, I think I did have it installed. All right, so now I should be able to just run Laravel new. And then what do I want to call this? The app name is Laragigs, so I'll just call it that. And that's going to get me set up here. And I'm just going to go back to the gist here for Valet. So I ran that. Now, since I'm using valet, I want to run valet park, and that will then give me a local domain of laragigs.test, because I called the project laragigs, and then I should be all set. So valet is really great, but unfortunately it's only for Mac. So let's run valet park. Okay, and now let's see, well, ls sites, and I have this laragigs folder. I should now be able to, I can close all this up now. All right, so I should be able to go to http laragigs.test, and there we go. So I have my Laravel project set up, and I want to open up my text editor in that laragigs. So let's cd into laragigs, and I'm going to run code dot, and that's going to open up VS Code, and you can see I have all my Laravel and files and folders on the side here. All right, so regardless of how you get set up, just get Laravel running on your local machine, open up your text editor. It doesn't have to be VS Code, and we should be good to go. So let's actually make this a little smaller here. Now, if you're coming from a minimalistic framework like Node.js Express or Python Flask, something like that, this is going to be pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of files and folders here, but the reason for that is because Laravel is very, very full-featured. There's a lot to it, so obviously there's going to be a lot of stuff. Now, there's a lot here that you don't actually need to understand at the moment, at this time when you're getting started. So I will focus on the things you do need to know. In some cases, I'm going to kind of take the long way to do something just so you can understand, what's going on, understand the big picture. For instance, when we get to models, I'm not going to just go right into using Artisan, which is a command line tool to generate our model, our eloquent model, which is an ORM. And don't let these words scare you. I'm going to get into what they are later. But what I'm going to do is manually create a model first, so you can see, how we can add methods to it, and then bring it into the controller or to the route, however we're doing it. So in some areas you might be like, well, why are we doing it this way? This takes forever. It's just to get you to learn, like I said, the bigger picture and what's going on kind of under the hood. All right, so I just wanted to mention that just in case at any time you guys feel like that. This isn't something that I just want to breeze through and you don't know what the hell's going on. You're just typing in commands and things just happen. I want to kind of dig in a little bit. All right, so we're going to start off. Well, first of all, what we're seeing here is a view. Okay, so Laravel has views, and I'm going to get to those a little later after we look at routing. But the views are located in this resources folder and then views. And you can see there's one view here, and it's a Blade template. Blade is a template engine that Laravel uses. It's great. It really cleans things up. We'll be really digging into it. But you can see it's called welcome.blade.php. So every Blade template is going to have this blade.php. And if we want to change something, like let's just search for documentation, because that's what we have right here. And if I change that to, let's just change it to docs. If I save that and reload, you're going to see that changes here. Now this welcome view is going to get completely blown away, so don't really worry about this just yet. But I want to start with routing. So if we go into routes, you can see there's a couple files here. This web.php this is what we're going to be working in for the most part when it comes to routes, because this is where we load all of our views or controllers, which we're going to get to later on. If you're creating an API, like a backend JSON API, then you would probably be using this API.php. And I'll show you a little bit how that works, but this is not, we're not creating it in API. I actually do have a complete Laravel 8 API project where we use Sanctum, which is an authentication library. I do have that on my channel if you're interested. So let's take a look at the one route we have here. So we have this route class, which is being brought in up here. Now, a lot of times you're going to see like this illuminate. These are just the namespaces that Laravel uses. If you want to see like exactly what this route is, on VS Code, you can just hold Control or Command and click on it, and it'll actually take you to that class, okay, if you want to learn more about it. You know, like this is a class called route. It extends this facade. If I click on that, I can check that out. And you're not expected to know like what any of this stuff does or what it is. It's all there to help you. Now that's being brought in, and we can use this route class to call a method called get. Now, I'm assuming that you have some basic knowledge of HTTP, you know, get request, post, put, delete, etc. So we can use any HTTP method here. So in this case, we're handling a get request, and this is going to take in two things. The first is going to be the endpoint that we want to listen for. In this case, it's just the root, just slash, and then it takes in a closure, which is just a function. All right, so if you have used like Express.js before, this is pretty similar to how you would, you know, deal with that. And you can actually pass in a request and response object here as well. But basically, we're just saying a get request to slash, we're going to return the view of welcome. So that's the welcome view that I just showed you in the resources views, welcome.blade.php. So we don't put on the .blade.php, we just put the name. So that's how you can load a view. Now, you don't have to load a view. You can do a lot of things from creating a route. So I'm just going to create a new one. Let's say get, and let's say we want this to be for slash hello. All right, then we'll add our closure, which is simply a function. And in here, let's say I want to return, I'll just return a string of hello world. And the stuff I'm doing right now, we're not going to keep. It's just for learning purposes. I would suggest that you just follow along. I think that's the best way to learn, but you don't have to at this point. So now let's go to slash hello, and we should just see our hello world. All right. So you can directly return a string or number or anything like that, but there is a response helper that we could use. So we can wrap this in response. And what this takes in, we can actually click through and see, it takes in the content, which in our case is just a string, and then also the status. So status, which by default is going to be 200, HTTP status of 200 means everything's okay. And then you can also add headers. All right, so let's just go ahead and run that. And we can actually wrap this hello world. We could put HTML in here directly. So if we do that, it should render the HTML. And if we open the network tab, and let's just reload that, and you can see the file here. If we look at the headers, you can see it's a GET request, 200 response. And if we go down here, you'll see the content type is text/HTML. Now, this response, remember, it takes in the content and it takes in a status. By default is 200. If I wanted to make it 404, I could do that and reload. And now you can see I get a status of 404. All right, but we'll make it 200. Now, if I want to add some headers onto this, I can add, let's close this up. I can add an arrow here. I usually like to put it on the next line. But we could then say header, and let's say we want the content type. So it's going to be HTML by default, but let's say we want to make it text/plain. So if we do that and I reload, you'll see that now it doesn't render the HTML. And if we look down here in the headers, the content type is text plain. And then maybe you want to add some custom headers, like, I don't know, we'll just say foo, let's say header. And then we could do foo and for the value bar. And if we come back over here and we look in the headers, we now have this foo bar. So you can have any custom header values that you want. All right, so let's look at wildcards now. So I'm going to actually create a new route because a lot of times you'll need to pass in like an ID or something like that. So for instance, you might have post / and then some kind of ID like 10. So I'm going to create another route here. Let's say route get. And what we would do is we would say /post / and then we'd use what's called a wildcard, and that's just curly braces, and then whatever that param is. So in this case, an ID. And then we would have our closure, our function, and we would pass in a variable with the same name, so ID. And then I could do like, let's say return response, and we'll say post, and then I'll just concatenate onto here the ID. All right, and then I need my semicolon. So let's go ahead and try that. We'll go to post 10, and you'll see it's gonna output the 10, that ID. It's getting passed in as a wildcard. Now we can also add constraints on here. Usually if it's an ID, well, not usually, I shouldn't say that, but in a lot of cases, it's only going to be numbers. So maybe you don't want to be able to pass, letters or symbols. So what we could do is add a constraint onto this by saying where, and we can do where the ID, and then we could put any regular expression that we want in here. So for instance, let's say we just want from 0, numbers from 0 to 9. That's all we want to accept. So now if I save that and I reload this, we get a 404 not found because this doesn't match the constraints. So if I do a number, 12, then that's going to work. Okay, so we have that functionality just built right in. Now there's, when it comes to debugging and showing values, etc., there's some helper methods that we can use. So one is DD. So I think it's, what is it? Die and dump. So let's say I want to show what the ID is. This will stop everything and show me that whatever I pass in this case, is the ID of 12. And it's actually going to be a 500 status because it's not going to, it's not going to do anything past that. So there's that. And then there's also die, dump, and debug, which is, DDD. So if I do that and we reload, that actually gives us quite a bit of information. So if we look down here, it shows us the code. It shows us where we, shows us the breakpoint where we called the DDD, shows us the entire request, any cookies or session values, body. So if you submit a form, we'll see the body, version, what is this? Laravel versions, things like that. Route parameters. So here's the ID of 12. So DD and DDD are very helpful functions when it comes to just debugging and seeing what things are. So we'll be using usually DD. I don't usually use this unless I have to. But yeah, so that's available. And now what I want to show you is sometimes we have a value like, let's say we have a route like search, and then we have a query string of maybe name. So we'll say name equals Brad, and we can have another one with ampersand. We'll say, I don't know, city equals Boston. All right, I'm not going to run this just yet, but if we have something like this, we can get these values through the request. So I'm going to just create another route here. Let's say route get, and we want this to be /search, and then we have our function. All right, now I can pass in here, like I said before, request response. So let's say request, and then the name of the variable, which is going to be request. Now to bring this in, this request right here has to be brought in, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but there's a couple VS Code extensions that I would recommend. So the first one is Laravel Blade Snippets. I would definitely recommend that you install this. When we get to Blade templating, it's going to give you highlighting and all that stuff. And then also I have this PHP namespace resolver right here. This is very helpful because with Laravel, you have to import there's a lot of different parts of the framework you need to bring in. Sometimes you don't always know what to bring in, but since I have that PHP name resolver, this request right here, I can just right click and I can say import class. Now it's going to show me there's a couple different request classes, so sometimes you do need to know which one you're using. In this case, it's going to be this one here, Illuminate HTTP requests. So if I click that, it says the class is imported, and you can see it's brought in up here. So it saves me from having to know exactly what to bring in and to have to go up and type it. So PHP name resolver I would definitely recommend, and as well as PHP IntelliFence. That's another good extension just for PHP in general. All right, so now we have this request object, and we could do a DD. Let's do DD request, and that should show us what is in that. So if I come over here and let's reload. Oh shoot, I didn't want to reload. I wanted to run the search. So let's say search name equals Brad and the city equals Boston. All right. So now this is showing us what is in this request object, which is a lot of different things, right? So for instance, if we look at, like, there's files. So if you upload files, which we'll be doing later, cookies, headers, and you can extend this open like that. You can see all the different headers. So for these values, like the name and city, that's going to be in this query right here. So query and then parameters, and you can see we have name and city. Okay, so if I wanted to access those values directly, which you're probably going to want to, we can just simply do request name, and let's actually, yeah, we'll put a space here. Let's concatenate that, put a space, and then we'll do request and city. So I'll go ahead and reload, and we should see Brad Boston. And we don't have to do it in this DD. We could just simply return that. So if I do that, all right, and you could use those values for whatever you want. All right, so I think that we spent enough time just looking at basic routing, at least in the web file. I do want to show you, if we open up api.php, this is what you're going to be using if you're building an API. So let's create a route here, and they're created the same, just route. We'll do a get request, and in here, let's do /posts, and then we'll have our function. And in this case, we're going to want to return JSON, right, for building an API. So let's say return, and then we can use that response helper. So response, but we can do this. We can say, we can put an arrow and then JSON. And in here, we'll pass in an array. And let's say we'll do posts. And we want this to point to an array, and then each item is going to have brackets around it as well. And we could say title and just say, I don't know, post 1, something like that. Now, since this is in the api.php, we have to actually prefix the route. So /post, we're going to prefix with /API. So /API/post, and that will automatically hit this. And then you can see we get JSON back. So if I go to, let's reload this, and you'll see that we get a content type of application/JSON. So we pass in a PHP array, and a multi-dimensional array, and it's going to get parsed as JSON. And this is how you would create an API. All right, so none of this stuff we need. If you want to keep this for reference or whatever, you can, but I'm going to just get rid of it, because actually I'm just going to get rid of all that. And then here, yeah, we don't need any of this stuff either, so we'll just get rid of that. And we'll go back to the home page. Okay. So now what I want to do is get started on our application. And again, I'm going to take it kind of slow and do things the long way, just so you understand exactly what's going on. So we have right now we have a view, right? Resources views of welcome.blade. So we can just clear everything out of here. And for now, let's just do an H1, and we'll just say listings here. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to rename this from welcome. I'm actually not even going to use a blade template yet, so we'll just call this listings.php, because your views don't actually have to be blade templates. They will be for the most part, but they don't have to be. So now in our routes, let's come down here, and we should be able to just return the view of listings. All right, and that's going to be the home page. So if I reload, we just see listings. Now, in most cases, you're going to want to pass data into your view, right? And ultimately, that's going to come from a database. It's going to go through a model. But for now, just to show you how to pass the data, we can pass in a second argument here of an array, and then whatever values we want. So let's say we want heading, and the value for that, we'll just say, I don't know, latest latest listings. Now, a listing is a gig. The name of the project is Laragigs, but instead of using gig as the resource within our code, I'm going to use listing. If you want, you can use gigs or jobs or whatever, but the resource I'm going to be using is listings. All right, so I'm going to save that, and then in listings.php, I should be able to get that. I can say php echo, and then I should have a listings variable. So if we come over here and reload, oh, never mind, it's heading. I passed in a value of heading, sorry. All right, so now we get latest listings. Now, as far as the data, like I said, ultimately that will come from a database, but let's pass in here now. Now we'll have a variable called listings, and let's make that an array of listings. So the first one, let's say, I'm not going to put all the fields we're going to use. We'll just have like an ID, and let's do a title. So for that, we'll just say listing 1, and then we'll have a description. Oops. We'll have a description, and I'm just going to grab some dummy text for now. So let's see, where is it? Let me just grab that and paste that in. All right, and then we'll have one more. So this right here, I'm just going to copy that down. Let's make sure we put a comma here, and then we'll just change the ID to 2, and the title will be listing 2. So now we're passing this array into our view, and I want to show each listing. So what we could do is a for each. So I could say for each, and let's say for each listings as listing, and we could go like that, and then we want to PHP end for each, and then in here we'll do an H2, and that's where we'll go ahead and PHP echo, and it's going to be listing, and since it's an array, we want to do this. So we want the title, and then let's do a paragraph, and we'll do PHP echo, and let's get the listing. Whoops. Later on, we'll be dealing with collections, so it'll be this syntax, but for now, it'll be like this. All right, so, and that. Okay, so if I come over here and I reload, now we see listing 1 and listing 2. So now what I want to do is change this listing template or view to a blade view or a blade template. So I'm going to rename this. So now it's going to be listings.blade.php, and you'll notice that it'll still work. Like I can still use this regular old PHP syntax, but since we're using Blade, we can clean it up quite a bit. And one of the common, I guess, negatives of PHP is it can be kind of an ugly language, you know, with all the tags. So instead of like PHP echo, we can now clean this up and just use curly braces around this, and that will output that variable. So if I go ahead and reload, we get the same thing. It's still showing us that heading. So it's similar to the syntax of JSX or an Angular or Vue template, and it really cleans things up. Now, we also have something called directives, where we can use loops and conditionals and all types of stuff. So there's a for each directive, so we can get rid of that, and directives are going to start with the @ symbol. We can also get rid of that, and then down here, get rid of that, and the PHP tag, and just put our @ symbol here. Again, if we reload, that's going to show us the same thing. And then here we can also clean this up by getting rid of that. And this one as well. Let's get rid of that and use our curly braces here and here. Okay, so that gives us the same result, and it looks much better. Now, there's just a lot of different directives you can use with Blade. I'm not going to go over all of them. If you want, you can look at the documentation. We even have a PHP directive, so we could do @PHP and then end it down here and end PHP, and then you could do whatever you want in here. So for instance, actually let's just set like test we'll say test equals 1, and then outside here I should be able to use that test variable, and you can see now I get 1. All right, so and that's useful for like filtering, things like that. If it's something you can't do in your controller or within your route, then you could do it directly in your view. Now there are conditionals we can use. So let's say if we have no listings, we just want to show a paragraph that says no listings. So we could do our if statement, and I'm going to say if count of listings, we'll say if that is equal to 0, then let's go down here and we'll end this. So it's just going to be end if. So if that's true, then let's say no listings found. All right, and then what we'll do is come over here and I'll just temporarily empty this array like that, and then if I reload, we get no listings found. Now there's another way to do this, and that's using the unless directive. So it's really up to you. It's all preference on how you want to do this, but we could do unless. So we'll say unless count listings is equal to 0, then we're going to do our for each, and then we could have an else, and of course with your if statements you can have an else as well, and then we want to end the unless, and then in here we'll do our paragraph and say no listings found. Maybe space that. Okay, so if we reload, we get the same result, but I'm going to put those listings back, and now we're going to see those. Now at the moment we have the data just hard-coded right here in our route, and usually your data is going to come through what's called a model. And in Laravel we have something called Eloquent, which is an ORM, an object relational mapper, and it gives us a very eloquent way to deal with our database. So we can do like the model name, such as listing, and then find or find all or whatever, and we have all types of filtering and sorting available to us. And to create an eloquent model in your terminal, don't run this right now, but we could just do PHP artisan, which is the command line tool to do a lot of different things, but one of them is make. We could say make model listing. All right, and that would create it would put a model file called listing with just a basic class, but it'll have access to all the eloquent stuff. Now before we get into that, I'd like to just manually create a model. So in app, so there's an app folder, and you'll see models. There's already a user model here because Laravel, again, it's a very full-featured framework, and you get user functionality right out of the box. When you run your migrations, it'll automatically create a user table, which we'll get into later. But right now, let's just create a listing.php file here, and that's the convention, is just a singular name of the resource. All right, and then we want a namespace so that we can access it from other files. As you can see here, the user model uses app/models, so we'll do the same thing. Let's say PHP, and let's say namespace app models, and then we're just going to create a class with the same name, so class listing, and then let's create a function. We're going to create a public static function, and we'll call it all because we want this to get all listings. And then obviously, I mean, this would come from a database, but just for now, let's go ahead and return, and I'm going to grab from this file here. I'm going to grab this, and let's return that, put a semicolon there. All right, so now we have this method of all that returns these listings. So to get this, let's actually get rid of that. And then we want to bring in our model. So remember, the namespace we used was app/models and then /listing. And then down here, we should be able to use the listing model. And to use the method, the all method, we're going to use double colon because it's a static method. So this is the PHP syntax, and we want to get all. All right, so we'll go ahead and save that. And if I reload again, we should see the same thing. All right, so but now we have our data is coming from our model. So now let's go back into our model and let's create a function to just fetch a single listing. So we'll come down here and let's say public static function, and we'll call this one find, and it's going to take in an ID because we want to find it by its ID. And again, when we use Eloquent, it's going to be a lot easier than this. We don't have to, you don't even have to write code to find a listing because you already have an Eloquent method. But for us, for now, let's just say listings. We want to get all the listings first, which we can get from the method right above, the all method. So I could use self. So when you have a class and you want to call another method or property, you can use self in a static function here, or to call a static function. And let's say self all. So that'll get all the listings. Then we're going to loop through the listings. So we'll say as listing. All right, and then what we want to do is get the one with the ID that's passed in. So we'll say if the current listing's ID is equal to the ID that's passed in to find, then of course that's the one we want. So we'll return that listing. All right, now let's use this in our routes file. We'll create a new route. Let's just say single listing, and let's add a comment here. And we'll say all listings. All right. And if you want, you at any time, you know, like right now, you could pause the video, and going by what we just did, you can try to create this route yourself and get the single listing showing. But basically, we want to create a route, and let's do /listings/ and remember I showed you how to use a wildcard because now we're passing in an ID, right? And then we're going to say function, and that's going to take in an ID. Okay, and then let's return a view. Now we don't have a single listing view yet, but we'll create it. So we'll say listing, and then we want to pass in an array that has a listing value, and that value is going to come from the listing model, and then find, and we're going to pass in the ID. Semicolon there. All right. Let's see, what am I missing here? Semicolon. Okay. Now let's create our route. So in views, we're going to create our view. Let's call it listing singular.blade.php. And then for now, what we could do is just copy from listings exactly what we have within the for each. And here, let's paste that in and save. And now we should be able to go to listings/ and then the ID. But let's actually, in the listings, we'll make the heading a link. So let's say A, and we'll set that to /listings/ and then the listing ID, right? Yeah, like that. And yeah, we'll end that A tag, and then we want to wrap that around. Okay, so it's going to go to listings/ and then whatever that current ID is. So let's save that, reload. Now these are links. If I click one, and let's just look at the URL. So it's listings/1. If I click on this one, it's listings/2. Okay. So I think next we should set up our database. Now I'm going to be using MySQL, so there's a few different ways to get that set up. If you're using XAMPP or XAMPP, then you already have it installed on your machine. If you want to install it separately, if you're on Windows, you could go to mysql.com, and let's just pull this out. And you could go to downloads, and then you want the community, so community downloads, and you can download the installer for Windows. Okay, that's if you're using Windows and you're not using XAMPP and you want to install it separately. All right, now if you're using Mac, then you can install it with Homebrew. Like you can just say brew install MySQL, and that's what I did. So I already have it installed. And basically we're going to want to create a database. But before we do that, I just want to show you, if you don't want to use MySQL, if you can't get it set up or something like that, you can use SQLite, and that's basically just creating a file. So if we go to config and you go to database.php, this is where you define the database you're using. Right here, this connection. So it's MySQL by default. But if you go down here, you have options for SQLite, you have options for Postgres, for SQL Server, so you can use any of these. Excuse me. If you do want to use SQLite, where you don't have to actually install anything on your system, you can just change this to SQLite, and then what you would do is in the database directory, you would create a new file called database.sqlite. Okay, like that. I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to delete it, but I just want to show you you can do that. And then all you would have to do is then go to your environment variables, so your .env, and then right here, no, not there, right here where it says DB database, you would put in your database.sqlite, and you don't need a username and password. Now for me, since I'm using MySQL, I do need to set up my database, and I need to enter these values. All right, so as I said, I already have it on my system, so I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to log in for now as my root user. So say root, and I don't actually have a password for my root user, but I want to create a new user. Let me just clear this. All right, so I want to create a new user, and I have a MySQL cheat sheet. I'm going to put that link in the description if you guys want to use this. And it's pretty much everything. I mean, to show my users, I could run this. So that shows I have, my root user. But what I want to do is create a new one. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to change. So this will be whatever password I want to use. I'll just use password. And then let's see. So some user, I'm going to change that to Brad. So we'll create the user. Now we want to grant privileges for that user. So we would run this. So let's pass that in and just change the username here to Brad or whatever you used. So basically granting all privileges for everything. Then we just want to run this flush privileges. And you can create users from phpMyAdmin, or if you want to use some other program as well. So I'm going to clear that up. Actually, I'm going to exit out because I want to now, excuse me, I want to log in with the Brad user. So I'll say MySQL, MySQL-U. I want to log in as Brad with a password, and my password. Okay, so now I'm logged in as Brad. So let's create a new database, and if you look down here, shows you how to do that. So create database. I'm going to call it Laragigs. Yeah, create database Laragigs, and that's it. We don't have to create tables or columns or anything like that, because with Laravel we have something called migrations, which are just files that we can run that will do all that stuff for us. All right, so if I say show databases, we should see Laragigs. Okay, and then the credentials for my database I'm going to put in here. I already have Laragigs as the database. Username for me is going to be Brad, and password is going to be password. All right, so we should be all set up for MySQL. So let's just exit out of here, and we should be good. Now, like I said, I think I said it, we don't have to set up any tables or columns or anything like that with MySQL itself, through the command line or through phpMyAdmin or anything like that, because we could do it through Laravel with what are called migrations. So I'm just going to close this stuff up for now. And if you look in the database folder, let's close that up. If you look in database, you'll see a folder called migrations, and there's already some stuff in here. So if you look at the name of the files, you can kind of tell what they do. So create users table, create password resets table, create failed jobs table, create personal access tokens. So if we look at the create users table, which is here by default, it's going to be a class. So all migrations are a class that have an up method and a down method. So up, in this case, you can see is going to create a user schema and a users table. and it's going to include all these fields: an ID, a name, an email, a timestamp, a password. So it'll create all of these columns for us. All right. If we roll back the migration, it'll run this excuse me, it'll run this down method, which will just drop the users table. So basically, how it was before the migration ran. Now, this is going to run when we run my PHP Artisan migrate, and it will create a users table. And if you wanted to, like maybe you want a username field, you could go ahead and add that in here, or whatever fields you want in the users table. But what we want to do is create a migration for our listings. Now, we don't have to manually create it. We can use Artisan. So let's open up a terminal here. And what we want to do is run PHP Artisan make migration. And we're going to call this create _listings _table. Okay, so let's run that, and then you'll see it'll actually create that file. So let's go ahead and open that up. So right here, create listings table, and by default we're going to have our class and the up and down method. Now it'll create the listings table, and right now we just will have an ID and timestamps, and obviously we want more than that. So let's go ahead and add the fields we're going to want. So we can just say table and then the type. So let's say string, and we're going to want a listing, a title for our listing. So let's say title. All right, and then we're going to copy this down a bunch of times, and we want, in addition to title, we're going to want tags. We're going to want the company name, so company. We're going to want location, and these are all strings, so we can leave it at table string. And email, so that's going to be the contact email. Website, maybe they have an application on their website. And description. Now description is going to be longer, so instead of string, we're going to use long text for that. That'll allow for more characters. And also later on, we're going to add to this, we're going to add a logo field, which is going to be the location of an image, because we will have the functionality to upload images or upload a logo to a gig or a listing. But this is all we need for now, so let's save it. And now if we open up our terminal here, the way that we can, because nothing has been done to the database yet, right? There's no tables added, nothing. We need to actually run the migrate command to do that. And when we run migrate, it's going to run all the migrations that are in that folder, including the users table, including the listings, all that. So let's go ahead and try it. So PHP Artisan, and we're going to run migrate. Okay, so no errors, that's good. Let's I'm going to check it. Now you can open up like PHP-MyAdmin. I'm going to use Workbench in a few minutes, but we can check it through here as well. So let's see, MySQL. I want to use the user Brad and enter my password. Okay, and let's say I'm going to say use and then the name of my database, which is Lara Gigs. All right, and then I'm going to say show. Let's say show tables. Okay, so now we can see all the tables, including users, including all this other stuff that came with Laravel, and our listings table. All right, and obviously there's nothing there. I mean, we could say select all from listings, and it's empty, of course. But we know that the migration worked out, so let's exit that. Now we should probably talk about seeding data and factories, because that's how we can quickly get stuff in the database just to test things with. So if we look in the database folder, there's a seeders folder and there's this database seeder file. So this will run if we run PHP Artisan db:/seed. And by default, so you see there's this run method, and by default there's this factory, this users factory. And what this will do, if we uncomment this, if we run this, it'll actually create 10 dummy users, okay, using the user factory. Where this comes from is in factories, you'll see a user factory.php, and it creates the users with something called Faker, which is a library to just create fake names, emails. You could see this is a hashed password. You can use now for like the current time. You can use different string methods and stuff. So it'll actually use this to create users, and we can pass in a number of users we want created. So let's just try this out. We're going to uncomment this and save it, and then we'll come down here and let's run PHP artisan and then db:/seed. So it says seeding completed successfully. And if I check my database, now I could log in, but I'm actually going to open up MySQL Workbench. And you can download this from mysql.com. It's absolutely free. So let's see, I'm actually going to create, let's do, I actually haven't used this in a long time. Let's create a new connection. And I'm going to call this Laragigs, and then let's see, the user, I'm going to use my Brad user that I created, and then for password, put my password in there. Okay, and let's try to connect. Okay, so if I click on this, it's going to open up an interface like this, and if we click on schemas, we should see Laragigs, and we have tables, and you could see all the tables, users and all that. So let's look at users, and let's see, to actually see the data, we can click on this little icon, and now you see we have 10 different users. They have an ID, a name, an email, a password, which is hashed. I want to make this bigger so you guys can see it, but I'm not sure how. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you could use MySQL Workbench, you can use the terminal, you can use phpMyAdmin. Just check it out and see if you have those users. If it ran successfully, chances are that they are there. Now, if you're using SQLite, there are programs that you can use. I think there's even a VS Code extension where you can see the data in your SQLite database. So you can use that if you want. What's the one I use? I think it's SQLite Explorer or something like that. But anyway, so what I'd like to do is be able to seed some listings. Okay, so we don't even need these users. Now, to get rid of these users, to basically to refresh the database, I could comment this back out. And actually, we don't even have to comment it out, but let's run PHP, and we want to run migrate :refresh. So if I do that, whoops, sorry, PHP artisan, migrate refresh. Now that's going to just run the migrations again, and this should be cleared out. So if I refresh this somehow, how do I refresh this? Let's say refresh all, and click that again, and now you can see there's no users in the database. All right, so anytime you want to refresh, you can do that. Now you can also refresh and run the seeder, and you can do that by, I'm actually going to uncomment this. You can do that by the same command we just did, migrate refresh, but then you can do --seed, and it will refresh and seed. So if I go ahead and refresh this again and click this icon, now there's 10 more users. Now I'd like to make it so that we can seed some listings. However, the model we have, we don't want to keep this model. We want an eloquent model, which will have a whole bunch of methods like this, like all and find and so on. So what we're going to do is just completely delete this listing, this model of listing, and then we're going to create a model with PHP artisan. So let's say artisan make : model, and we want to call it listing. And you'll see if we run that, it creates a listing.php. Now, this class itself doesn't have anything in it. It doesn't have any methods, but it extends model. Okay, so we have, if you look at the side here, look how big this file is. So we have all of these, all these methods that do all kinds of things. And we don't have to really touch this file much. I mean, when we add relationships and stuff, there's a couple things to add, but for the most part, we don't have to really do much to the model. And if we come back to our site, Let's close the cheat sheet up. If we come back here and I reload, we don't get any errors or anything, because if I go back to our view, so our web.php, there's nothing we have to change here. All is actually part of Eloquent. So we can actually click on it and you'll see that it actually gets all the queries. All right, so really cool. So if we did have listings in the database, they would show here, because all and find are both valid, valid methods. So let's now go back to our database folder here, and in the seeders, I'm going to show you first how we can just add some static data with our seeder, and then I'm going to show you how we can actually create a listing factory and use Faker, much like the user does. Now I have a file called data.php, which I'm going to just put in the root here, and it's not going to be used by our app in any way. It's just some sample data, some sample listings that we can use. So I'm going to grab this first item with the brackets here, just copy that. And in our seeder, I'm going to go under where we bring in the users, and let's take the listing model, and we're going to call the create method, which obviously, creates in the database. That's going to take in that item that I just copied. Now we need to bring in the model. We could do this, app models user, or we could just import the class. Okay, so now you can see that the listing model is being brought in. We're going to call create. It's going to create this one item. Now I want to create two, so I'm just going to grab that. Actually, I'm not going to grab it. We'll just do listing create, because we're going to copy it from that data right here, data PHP. We'll just grab the second item here and copy that and put that in there. So now when we run seed, it's going to create 10 users, and you can change this. We could do like 5 users. And then it's going to manually create these 2 listings with our hard-coded data. So let's try it out. I'm going to come down here and we're going to run the same thing, migrate, refresh, -- seed. Make sure you do the seed or it's not going to add the data. So we get database seeded, database seeding completed successfully. So now I'm going to open up Workbench here, and this is the users right here. If I refresh this, we should have 5 users now. Okay, so there's our 5. And if I go to listings, and let's click on the little table icon, there we go. So we have our Laravel full stack developer, or senior developer, full stack engineer, our tags, our company. So all that data is now filled in. And if we go to our application now and I reload, we're going to see those 2 listings, because this is coming from the database. And if I click on this, it'll take me to the first one and the second one. All right, so pretty cool. Now, what I'm going to do now is completely optional, but I'm going to show you how we can create our own factory, just like we have a user factory. So down here in the terminal, let's say PHP artisan, and we're going to say make factory, and let's call this listing. Yeah, we'll call it listing factory. Okay, so now if we look over here in factories, we have our listing factory, and it's just going to have this public function definition, and then in here we can put whatever fields we want, and we can also use Faker just like the user is here. So if we wanted a fake name, an email, there's all types of stuff that that you can use. So where is it? Our listing factory. Let's see. We want a title, and these are just it's gonna look weird. Like, we're not gonna get titles like this. It's just gonna be like dummy text, lorem ipsum or whatever. And if you don't want to use this, of course you don't have to. Now this with Faker, we can say this Faker, and then I'm gonna make this a sentence. Okay, so that'll be our title, and then tags. I'm actually going to put these in, just hard code in. We'll say Laravel, because I don't think there's a comma separated value method to create with Faker. So we'll just manually put those in. And let's see, we have our company, And there's actually a company method we can use. So let's say this Faker and company. All right, and we'll just copy this down a little bit. So then we also have email, and there's actually a company email method that we can use, which is cool. Let's see, website. So website, and there's a method called URL. And then what else do we have? Location. So location, and there's a city that we can generate, and then description. Now description is going to be longer, so what we can do is we can use paragraph, and then what we pass in here, I believe, is the number of sentences in the paragraph, so we'll say 5. And that should do it. I believe that's all the fields, right? So title, tags, company, location. Yeah. Now to use this, we want to go into our seeder, and I'm going to leave these two here and just comment them out. And again, you can do this however you want. If you want these to be the 2 that are added, that's fine. But I do want to show you how we can create, how we can use a factory. So we can say listing and factory, the number of listings we want. We'll do 6, and then we should be able to just do create, just like that. Yeah, so same thing that we did up here. And we'll save that, and now let's run the same command, the migrate refresh seed. Let's run that, and if I come over here and reload, now we have 6 entries. Okay, and the title, like I said, this stuff is going to look weird, but it's going to add it, we can get 6 entries really quick. And then it's only going to show the description and the title because that's all we put in the template, but we'll obviously change that up. So now we have a way to quickly add fields to the database, and at any time we can refresh it and reseed it. So let's close this stuff up. All right, so now that we kind of have our model set up, we have our database, we have seeders. Now I think we can start to build out the site, build out the layout. Now, before we open up the theme and start bringing in, all the HTML and the Tailwind classes and all that, I first want to show you how we can create a layout, because obviously when you have your HTML head, you have your menu and stuff like that, that's going to be on every page. The footer, that stuff is going to go in your layout, and then you're going to show your views depending on what the URL is inside of that layout. So what we'll do now is in views, let's create a layout.blade.php file. And like I said, we're going to deal with the theme in a little bit, in a few minutes. But for now, let's just put like a basic wrapper here, basic template. And I don't know, we'll say Lara Gigs. Ultimately, we're going to copy from the theme, but for now, let's take that. And what I want to do is render, let's just put an H1 here, and we'll say Lara Gigs. And I want to render my view here, right? So this is where my view should output. So here I want to use the yield directive. So I'm going to say yield and then content. Okay, now my views, I want to extend this layout and put my view here so that this stuff is all around it, which would be like your style sheet, anything in the head. You could have your menu here as well, anything you want on every page. And then in the individual views, so let's go to listings, and up here we can now say extends. We want to extend the layout, and then we want to wrap this in a section directive. So we'll say section, and the section is going to be the content. So whatever this is should match this. Okay, so both content, and then we also want to end the section. So end section, and later on I'm going to show you how we can use components, and we can actually we can make our layout a component, which makes it easier to extend without having to do this, But for now, we'll do it this way. And if I reload, we should now see, you can see we have a title up here, and we see the H1 of Lara Gigs, because that's what's in our layout. And then let's do the same thing with the listing view. So I'm going to copy those 2 lines, and we're going to paste that in here, and then we just want to end our section. And now if I go to the listing view, same thing, we have the title, so we have that layout wrapper. Now this part is going to be a little frustrating because we have to bring a lot of the layout, a lot of the theme that I created into these views and into the layout. So you're going to have to copy some HTML and bring it in and kind of do it exact so it doesn't look screwed up. So just try to bear with me. So in the repo, I'm going to have a folder called Larragig's theme, which is going to be just the HTML theme. It has, if I open up the index.html, just pull this out here. So this is just the HTML and CSS, and it uses Tailwind, so there's not even any custom CSS. All right, so we have the index page. Each listing is going to look like this. So ultimately, this right here, this list of listings is going to look like this. And then we have this hero, we have the search bar here, we have the footer with the post a job link, the post a job or listing form, the register form, login form. If we click on a single listing, ultimately that's what this is going to be, the single listing. And then just some buttons here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So our layout has to have obviously the head, title, stuff, all that, and then also the header with the logo and the links. The hero is going to be what we call a partial because we're just putting it on the home page. And also the search, we'll probably make that a component because Blade does have a component feature where you can actually pass in props. So for instance, each of these listings will be a Blade component. We pass in the listing as a prop to show the data. So pretty cool. It's almost like working with a front-end framework. So Blade is a really cool thing to work with. And then to make it dynamic, you could use something like Alpine.js, which we're going to get into a little bit later on. So yeah, that's what this is going to look like. Now, as far as the files go here, the first thing we should do, let's just take this step by step. So there's a couple images like the logo, this Laravel logo. This is a background image for the hero. And then this is what I'm using when listings don't have an image. It will just be the Laravel logo. So let's go over here and you'll see there's a public folder, and that's going to be our public assets. So I'm going to create a folder in there called images. So let's do that, and then let's bring over those 3, logo PNG, Laravel logo, and no image. We're going to bring those over to public and images. All right, so that's the first step. Now, these HTML files, I'm actually going to open up this whole folder within Sublime Text. And I'm opening in Sublime Text so you know the difference. You know that if I'm in Sublime Text, I'm working within the HTML theme. And if I'm in VS Code, obviously that's our project. So let's see here. For the layout, it's ultimately that's going to have all this stuff. But if we look down here, we have our hero, which that will be a partial. Then we have in the main tag, we have our search form, which will ultimately be a component. And then this grid, this div with the grid, and this is going to have all the items. You can see item 1. Item 2, they're just hard coded. So I think what I want to do is, let's see, I think we should do the listings page first, which is basically this whole div. Yeah, let's take this div, just this first div right here, nothing else. Let's go to listings. Yeah, listings.blade, and we want that to be outside of the for each. And the unless. Actually, we can replace this heading. Let's get rid of that. And then we want to make sure we end this. So under the unless, let's do a /div. Okay, so now everything's in there. Now I'm going to take just the first item here. So the div starts there and ends here, because we just need one of these, because remember, this is going to be dynamic. So let's copy that, and then we loop through the listings, and instead of this, I'm going to paste this in. Okay, so if I were to just save this now and take a look at our project, you can see it's still it's going to show 6 items because it's still coming from the database, right? For each listing, which are 6 in our database, it's going to show this HTML. Now the title here, let's change this from being hard-coded to dynamic. So we have our listing, and then we could do this syntax like we were doing before, like listing title. That should work. Let's try it out. Yeah, but when we're dealing with eloquent models, it actually gives us what's called a collection, and with collections we can actually do this syntax with the arrow. So that should work as well, which I prefer. I think that looks much cleaner. So that is the title. This is going to be the company, so let's replace this with title company. Okay, so if we reload that, whoops, title company. What the hell is wrong with me? Listing company. All right, and these are just from the database. It's the dummy data. Now this right here, the UL, this is all the tags. I'm just going to leave that for now because we're going to have to do something different with that. So just leave that as hard-coded tags for now, and then the location is going to go here. So this will be listing location. So now we should see these dummy locations. All right, so that's all we have to change here for now. And the reason we're not seeing it styled is because we didn't put the head with the Tailwind link and all that stuff in the layout yet, right? The layout is just this. So now let's go back in here and let's take from the very top, so the doc type, and let's go down to, let's see, we have the hero. That's actually going to be a partial. And this div right here, that's already in the listings. So yeah, all we really have to do right now is go down to the nav. All right, so the very top of the file down to the nav, I'm going to put that in the layout above the yield. Okay, so we'll paste that in. And then for under the yield, we're going to get, let's go down to the bottom here. We're going to get from the closing HTML, and let's go up to the footer. Actually, let's also put the main tag. We actually want main wrapped around this. So that'll be the ending main tag, and then everything under that, which is the footer, down. Like that. All right, so let's save that, see what we get. All right, cool. Let's make this a little bigger so we can see. Okay. Now, let's see. The reason we're not seeing the images here in the listings is because if we look in our listings blade, it's trying to show Acme PNG. What I want to show is the no image PNG. All right, so if we say no dash image PNG, now those images are going to show, and they don't show on very small screens, so it's fine if you don't see them when it's smaller. Now there is an asset helper that we can use to show public images like this, which you probably should use. So we're going to wrap this, let's close that up for a second. We're going to wrap this in curly braces, and we can say asset and then pass in the path like this. So that will wrap that and then do that. So that should work. Let's see, reload. All right, that still works. And we're going to do that for the logo, which is in the layout up at the top here. So the logo image right here, I'm going to wrap that. Let's see, logo.png. We want to close that up. Let's make sure that still works. And then also, whoops. Well, I was going to say the hero, but we didn't put that in yet. Now the hero is going to be a partial, right? Because we have the search bar and we have the hero. If we go back to the index HTML, let's go up here and let's see. So the hero section, I tried to label everything nicely so you can tell where everything is. But this section right here, I'm going to copy that. And then what we're going to do is use a partial. So in the views folder, we're going to create a folder called partials. And inside partials, we'll create a file. Now the convention is to use an underscore, so we're going to call this underscore.hero.blade.php, and then we can just paste that in. Okay, we don't need the comment here. So yeah, we'll paste that in, close it up, and then I'm also going to put the search. Ultimately, we'll probably use a component for this, but for now, we'll just take that search form, and in partials, we'll create an underscore search.blade.php. Paste that in, save it. Good. Now, the hero, I only want to show on the home page, which is the listings page. So in listings.blade, let's go right above, we'll go right above the div, the grid div, and we can say include, and we want to include underscore hero, or I'm sorry, we want partials because it's in the partials folder, dot underscore hero. I believe that should work. Okay, so now that shows there, and if I go to the listing, single listing, okay, so that's not working because it's going to show HTML. So we just want to make sure we change this now. Actually, it's going to be slash listings slash, and then in here, the listing ID. All right, so now if I click on that, that'll go to the single listing, which isn't styled yet, but that's fine. We'll handle that after. All right, so yeah, we have that. Now the search, that's only going to show, I want that to show on both the listings, the home page, and the single listing. So what we'll do is go up here and let's see, we have our partials coming in here. Let's put the search right under it. So I'm also going to include, I'm not putting it in the layout because I don't want these to show on every single page. So this is going to be partials dot underscore search. So if I reload that, now we have the search here. All right, now I'm also going to put that on the single listing. So let's go to listing and put that there. And if we go to the single listing, now we see the search again. Let me just stretch it out, make sure that oops, I keep hitting the logo. We should probably fix the logo link. Yeah, because I can't get back. So in the layout, the logo link is index.html. We're going to just change that to slash. So now if I click on the logo, it should take us home. All right, cool. And again, let's just check it out. Okay, I think that looks all right. So we have our layout, and I know this, it's kind of frustrating when you're copying like a bunch of HTML and classes and all that, but I do want this to look decent. So I think next we should do the single listing formatting, because right now, you know, if we go to listing.blade, it's just this. So if we open up our theme, and I think we're all set with index.html, so we can close that up, and let's go to show HTML. And all we don't need like the search and all that. It's just this div right here with MX4 and then the A tag above it, the back. So let's grab the div and also the A tag. Okay, so we'll just grab that, copy it, and then paste it in here. If we save that and reload, should look like that, but this is all, obviously it's all hard coded, so we want to replace some stuff in here. For the image, I'm going to use the asset helper, so we'll say asset, we'll wrap this images slash, and let's use no image, no dash image, and make sure we add the ending on here, and that should show the Laravel logo now. For the title right here, let's change that to listing title. Let's change the company name. So that's going to be listing company. We'll leave the, again, leave the UL, the the tags for now. And then the location. So listing, location. And here we have the description. So we're going to replace paragraphs here with the listing description, description. Jesus, I can't type or spell. All right, and then let's see, we have the mail to here. We want to just take this email right here, and we want to put in the contact email, which is going to be listing email. And then for the website, let's replace this. So that'll be the listing website. And I think that should do it. So let's save it, reload, and now we have, it's all dynamic except for the tags here, which we'll get to. And the back, we should probably change that link to, let's see, instead of index.html, it's just going to go slash. So reload, now we should be able to click back. All right, so now we have all of our listings and we can go to each page. Good. Now, next thing I'd like to do is, actually one other thing I want to show you in the routes file, since we're now using Eloquent, since we're using Eloquent models, we can use something called route model binding. Now here, right, we have listing /ID, we're passing in the ID, we're getting the listing by that ID. If I were to go to, listing / and then something that doesn't exist, I'm going to get this error. Now, one thing we could do, if we do it this way, is we could put a variable. We could have a listing, and we would take this, cut that, and put that in here, right? And then what we could do is check to see, we'll say if listing. So if listing, then we'll take this, and whoops, wrong button. We'll take this and put that in here, and then set listing to listing, right? And then else, then we could handle this how we want. We could do an abort and do 404, right? So now if I come back over here and I reload, now what's cool is when we use Eloquent models, we can use something called route model binding. So instead of passing in ID here, I could pass in listing, and in the function here, we could do we pass in our listing model and then a variable of listing, and these should match this and this variable. And then instead of having to do find ID, the listing will just be available in here. So I can just pass it into the view like this. And I don't have to do this check because it'll automatically have this 404 functionality. So what I'll do is copy this return right here and just replace all this, right? So that all we have is, loading our view, passing in the listing. This is coming from here, from this function. So now if I go over here and reload, we still get the 404. And if I go to a listing that actually does exist, then that works. Okay, so much cleaner. Now I think what we should do next is look at components. So I'm going to close up the view for now. I'm sorry, the routes for now, the single listing page. And in the, we'll close the layout too, but in the listings, right? So this page here, I want each of these to be a component. So we have the grid right here, and then we're looping through the listings. And then this here is what each one of these are. So I want this to be a component. So what we can do is grab this div right here, and let's cut that. And then in the views folder, we're going to create another folder called components. Okay, and then in components, let's create a new file here, and we'll call this, let's call it a listing-card component. So it's going to be .blade.php. All right, and then in here, I'm going to go ahead and paste this in. Now we need access to listing, right? So this component is actually going to take in a prop. and we define our props up here. We say at props, and then we can pass in here an array of props, and we want the listing prop that's going to be passed in. So back in our listings, in this for each, the way we can access that component is like this. We can say x dash and then the name of the component, which is listing dash card, and we can end it like that. Now if I wanted to pass in just like a regular string, I could say listing, and I could do this. However, since I want to pass in a variable like that, listing, then to bind that to this prop, we have to add this colon right here. Okay, so if you're going to pass in a variable, then you want to have this prefix with a colon. So let's go ahead and save that. Let's make sure our component is saved, and let's reload this, and you can see we get the same result. Now what I'd also like to do, if we look in the listing card, there's this div with the background gray, the border gray, and rounded, and padding 6. So that's this right here, this gray background. We also have this in some other areas on the listing page. You can see it's around this whole thing, and we don't have the form set up yet, but those will also have that background. So I think what we should do is have a card component that wraps around whatever we want. So in components, in that folder, let's create another file, and we'll just call it card.blade.php. All right, and then what we're going to do is take this div, just this div right here, and grab that, paste that in, close it. Now, if you want a component where you want to wrap it and have, because with the card we just did it, it's self-closing. But if we want to be able to do something like this, X card, and wrap it and have a closing tag and then put something in it, what we can do is use a slot. All right, so inside here, we're just going to have a variable called slot, and whatever we pass in, whatever we surround the tags with, will be output here. All right, so let me show you. If we go back to listing card and we replace this div here with, let's say, x-card, and then we want to make sure that we close it down here. So let's see, we have that div. So this right here, we want to get rid of that, and we want to have our ending X card and save, and we should have the same thing. All right, and now we should also be able to go to our listing page. So let's go over to views and then listing, and right here you can see it's the same kind of thing. Now it does have a little more padding, so I'm going to show you how we can pass in extra classes if we want. But let's just get rid of actually this whole thing. So this div ends right here, right? It's a second to last div, I believe. Yeah, so we have this MX4 around it. So what we'll do is replace this with x-card, and down here that's already replaced for me. So I'm going to save that, and let's reload, and we get basically the same thing. The padding is a little less though. Now, if I want to pass in a class, so like for this X card, if I want to do this and do P-10, actually let's make it bigger so we can actually see the difference. So we'll do like P24 for now. If I save and reload, that's not going to do anything. If we want to be able to add attributes in here and have them actually work, then we need to go into the component and we need to add to this. All right, so on this div right here, what we'll do is open up our curly braces, and we're going to say attributes. So we have this attributes variable, and then we can say attributes merge, and then we pass in here an array and whatever attribute we want, so class, and then we can set that to whatever we want, which in our case is going to be these classes here. So I'm going to just copy those, and then we can completely get rid of the class attribute here and then put the classes in here as this array value. So now what will happen is it'll use these classes by default, but it'll also merge any other classes excuse me, any other classes that we add. So now if I come over here and reload, it breaks. Let's see, attributes, did I misspell? Oh, I did misspell it. All right, so let's try that again. And now you can see we have that wide padding because in the listing I passed in, where is it? Was it this? No, it's a listing right here because I passed in this. I don't actually want it that big. I just wanted to make sure that we could tell the difference. So I'm going to make it P10. All right. And I could pass any class that I want into this. I could do like BG black into this card component and that would work. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And we're going to be using this card component for like our forms and in a few places around the site. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can use components, how you can pass in props, how you can use this slot if you want to surround something with the component tags. So pretty cool. So what I'd like to do next before we get into controllers is handle the tags. So this on the listing page as well as the listing card component, we have these tags, right? That's coming from here, listing card. Well, we have it in two places, right? We have it in listing card and we have it on the single listing page, this UL right here. So I want to make a component for this. So what I'll do is in listing card, I'm going to grab that UL and I'm just going to cut that for now. And then in components, let's create a new file here and let's call this, what do we want to call this? Let's call it listing-tags.blade.php. And we'll paste this in here. Now, at the moment, this is just a hard-coded list with just Laravel API backend view. We want this to come from the database. And in the database, we have if we take a look, let's see, I'll open up MySQL Workbench. And let's see, listings. If we refresh this. So if we look at tags, right now, they're all the same, but it's a comma separated value list, right? So we have Laravel, comma, API, comma, backend, and we want to display it like this. We want to display it in an unordered list. So what we'll do is we'll take in the categories, right? Or not categories, the tags as props. So let's say at props, and that's going to take in an array, and let's call the prop tags CSV because that's what it's going to get passed in. It's coming from the database. It's going to be a comma separated value list. Now I actually want to turn that into an array so I can loop through and then display it as you see here. All right, so basically for a list item, I want to be able to loop through. So I'm going to actually use my PHP directive. So let's say nphp, and we can put whatever we want in here. So let's say tags, we'll create a variable, and then we're going to use the explode function, which is going to take in as a first param, where do we want to split the string? We want to split it by the comma. All right, and what we want to pass in here as a second argument is going to be the prop. So tags, what is it? Tags CSV. All right, so it's going to turn that comma separated value list into an array and put it into this variable. So now down here, let's get rid of all but one of these list items. And then let's go ahead and do a for each. And we're going to say for each tags as tag. And let's go ahead and add the end for each. And then we should be able to just switch this out, and in here we're going to put the tag, and then I also want to be able to click on it and filter by that tag, filter the posts or filter the listings by that tag. So for the href here, let's say slash, and then we'll pass in as a query param tag and set that to whatever the tag is. All right, so now let's save this. And then let's go to our listing card where we had that UL, and now we can use our component. So x-listing-tags, and then we want to pass in here, tags CSV, and set that to, what do we want to set that to? The listing, so listing and tags. All right, so let's save that. Let's check it out. And there we go. So now we can see Laravel API backend, and they're all going to have that because that's what is in the database. Now, I also want the same thing on the single listing. So right here, so all we have to do is use this component in there as well. So I'll copy this, go to the listing page. Where is it? Listing right here. Replace this whole UL with that component. You can kind of split this up a little bit. And that's that. So if I save, we come back over here and reload. Now these are coming from the database. So we were able to clean that up quite a bit with a component. And you can really separate things out into components, you know, even like with form fields, and you can really clean it up. So I really like the Blade components feature. So let's see, we have this page pretty much all set. And then we have all of these. So I think the next thing I want to do is create our controller. Because right now, let's close up the views for now. And let's open up our routes. So yeah, we'll just close these up. So we want to go into web PHP. And right now, I mean, we don't have much functionality. And this heading, we should have got rid of that a long time ago. We don't need that. This stuff here, returning the view, we could keep it this way, but usually you're going to have a controller for all your resources. So we'll have a listing controller when we start to deal with authentication and users. We'll have a user controller. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go down to our terminal, and we can use Artisan to create a controller. So we'll say PHP Artisan make controller, and we're going to call it listing controller. All right, so if we run that, that's going to create up here in app, and then in HTTP, you'll see there's a controllers folder, and then there's a listing controller, and it creates the class and everything for us. Now, we're going to have some methods in here. Right now, we're going to have, let's say, public, we're going to say public function index. Okay, so we want to have index. We're also going to have public function show. And the purpose of both of these, so we'll just put a comment here. So this is to show all listings, or get and show all listings. And then here will be show single listing. And all we want to do here is in the routes file, I'm going to grab this return view listings and cut that, and I'm going to put that into the index. And then this here, I'm going to grab this and put that into the show, and show is going to take in a listing. So I'm going to pass in listing and then the variable name of listing, and we just want to bring this in. So I'm going to import the class, the model, so that it imports that up here, and then let's save that. Now instead of having these functions here, we're going to replace these with the controller. So let's just grab this and delete that. And we want, so what we're saying here is we want this slash, we want that to go to the listing controller and the index method. So we can pass in here some brackets, and we'll say listing controller, and then the way that we do this is we do class, and then we pass in the method, which in this case is going to be index. All right, and then we want to do the same here. So we want to get rid of this function and pass in some brackets and say listing controller class, and then we want to pass in the method name, which is going to be show. And now if we save that, hopefully if I reload, now we get the same exact thing. We just move the functionality into a controller. Now I want to talk a little bit about naming conventions. So I'm going to paste something in here. So when we have a resource like a blog post, a user, a listing, an employee, whatever that resource is, there's 7 common resource routes that we have routes and methods that we have to deal with those, and they do specific things. So we already have index and show. Index will show all listings. Show will show a single listing. We also have create. So that will display the form on the page to create a new listing. When you submit the form, that will be the store. That stores the new listing. Then you also have an edit page, which will show the edit form on the page, and then an update to actually update the listing. So you'll submit the edit form to update, and then destroy to delete the listing. Okay, we're using listings, but this could be absolutely any kind of resource. So it's actually a better convention for us with our views, which are, let's go into resources, views. Instead of having these called listing.blade and listings.blade, what I'm going to do is create a folder called listings, right? And then I'm going to move the listing and listings into the listings folder. So I'm going to move those, and I'm going to rename the listings, right? So this right here, listings, we're going to rename that to index.blade.php. And then listing, which is the single listing, we're going to rename that to, as you probably guessed, show.blade. Now this is going to break because in our controller, we're loading the view of listings and listing, which don't exist anymore. So what we can do is actually say listings.index, because we have it in a listings folder and then a file called index. And then here, this would be actually listings.show. So if we go ahead and reload, now that should work. So that's the convention that you're going to see a lot of for these different, these common resource not controllers, methods and views. All right, now before we get into filtering, because I think the next big thing I want to do is be able to filter through this search form as well as clicking on these tags. Before we get to that though, I want to show you another option that you can use for your layout. So right now we're using, in our layout, we have this yield, and then whenever we have a page where we want to use the layout, we have to extend it, and then we have this section that wraps around it. So section, end section. A way that I like to do it that I think is easier, especially if you're going to have a lot of different views, a lot of pages, instead of having to keep doing all this, another way to do it is to have your layout be an actual component. So what I mean is we can take this layout, and you don't have to do this. I mean, if you want to put it back to how we have it, that's absolutely fine. There is no better or worse way. But I'm going to move layout to components. And instead of the yield here, since it's a component, remember we can do this slot. So if we want to wrap this around something. So we'll put a slot here, and then in the views that we want to use, so in listings, we have index and show, instead of doing this, like extends and then the section and the end section, we'll just wrap the layout component around that. So X layout, X dash layout, and then down here X layout. Okay, and then the same thing on the show page. Instead of doing the extends and section, we'll just simply do X layout, and down here get rid of that and X layout. And now if I come over and I reload, we should have the same exact thing. All right, so again, it's just another way of doing things. This way, anytime you add a new view, all you have to do to use the layout is wrap it in this instead of extending and all that. All right, just make sure that you, instead of the yield, you put the slot here. Okay, so now let's close all this up. Let's see. I'm just going to keep this stuff here so that you guys have it for reference. Actually, we'll put it, let's put this up here, because we are going to be creating all of these views and methods, or routes to the method that loads the view. But now what I'd like to work on is filtering. So let's start off with the tags, right? So if I click on one of these, it takes me to, I'm on the same page, but now I have this query string up here of tag, and it's equal to Laravel because that's what I clicked on. If I click on API or backend, it'll show those. So I want to be able to then filter the post by only posts that have that particular tag. So there's quite a few ways we can do this, just like with most things. What I want to do is what's called a scope filter. Now first, do you remember how we get this? How do we get this value from here? We went over it in the very beginning when we were looking at routes. Well, we're going to go into the controller now since we're working in the controller. And this is the index page here that we're on, but we have this query string of tag. So the way that we get this, let's go above the return and let's use our DD. Remember the die dump function? And in here, we want the request. And there's a few ways we can do this. We can use dependency injection, and we can say request like that. And then let's show the request, right? And I believe, yeah, this is already being brought in, this request. So let's save that, and then let's come over here and reload. All right, and now if we look at query right here, we should have this tag, and right now it's equal to Laravel. So that's how we can get it. Now there is a request helper, so you actually don't have to pass this in. And what we can do is just remove the money sign, and it's going to be a function. So we can do that. Let's see what that gives us. So if I reload, we get the same thing. If we look at query, we get tag Laravel. So it's up to you if you want to do it, the dependency injection, or if you want to use the helper. It's preference. There really is no right or wrong. I mean, some people might say different, but there really isn't. It's just preference. So now we know how to get our request. Right now, to get the actual tag, there's a couple ways we can do it. We can do it like this. So if I reload, you'll see that. Or what I'm going to do is we can just pass in tag like this and reload. We get the same thing. So we know we can get whatever that tag is. Now we want to filter the listings by that tag. And we can do that with a scope filter. So in our model, we actually want to create a function. So let's say public function, and we're going to call this scope filter. And what this is going to take in is a query. So let's say query, and then it's going to take in an array of filters. All right. Now I'm not going to put anything in here just yet, but what this will allow us to do just by creating this is on our listing model, we'll now be able to filter. And by the way, instead of just doing all here, we can do listing latest, and this is latest is a function, so add our parentheses, and then we can do get. So if I do latest get, let's actually get rid of this die dump and reload. It's going to do the same thing, except now it's actually it's sorted by the latest. You get the latest first, and it's sorted, as opposed to just I don't know, I think all is just random order, but it's basically the same thing as all. It's just sorted. Now since I created that scope filter, what I should be able to do is add on to this and say filter like that. All right, and what I want to pass in here is going to be the request, and then in here we want to pass in tag, and that is going to get passed in as this filters. Now this has to be an array, so we actually just want to wrap tag here in brackets, so we're going to get an error. All right, and then I'll save that, and then in listing, let's just close this up. For the scope filter, what we can do is, first of all, check. Actually, I'm just going to do a die dump here real quick and pass in filters. This should be filters tag like that. That should give us the tag. So let's reload this, and yeah, we get Laravel. So let's actually check for this, because we want to make sure this only happens if there's actually a tag. So I'm going to put an if statement here. And we'll use the null coalescing operator, which is double question mark. and say false. So what this is saying is, you know, if this is not false, then move on. If there is a tag, then do what is in here. If not, it just won't do anything. So let's take that query that we have, and we can say where. And essentially what we're doing here is an SQL-like query, and we want to look in the tags column in the database. So we'll say tags like, and we want to have the request that comes in, we want to, or I should say the tag, whatever this is that comes in, we want to, it can be before or after, or anything can be before or after it, and that's represented with a % sign. So we're going to put in here a %, and then we're going to concatenate in here the whatever the request tag is. So request tag, and then we just want to concatenate. We want to put another % sign after it. So it's just going to search for whatever that tag is in this tags column. All right, and if it matches, then that will get returned. So let's go ahead and save that. And yeah, we should be all set. So if I reload this, now if I click on like any of these, we're still going to see all the posts, because right now in the database, they all have these same 3 tags. But we can test it out if we change one of those tags. So I'm going to go into MySQL Workbench, and I know this is really tiny. Sorry for that. I just don't know how to zoom in on this. So I'm going to change one of these. So instead of API in the middle here, and you guys probably can't see this, but I'm going to change, I can barely see it. So I'm going to change it to view and hit enter. And then let's see, I'll change another one. It's this one here. Instead of backend, let's do, I don't know, let's say engineer. All right, enter. Now I do have to click apply for that to actually stick. So I'm going to click apply and then close. And now that should be updated in the database. So if I come back here, and for now, let's just get rid of the tag up here. And now we should see, let's see, yep, we see view right here. And then this one has engineer. So I'm going to click on the view, and you'll see we only get back this listing because this is the only one with view. All right, if I click on Laravel, then we're going to see all of them because they all have Laravel. If I click on engineer, then I'm only going to see this one. So we're now able to filter by these tags. And that was pretty damn easy as far as the amount of code that we wrote. Just creating this little function allowed us to add on the this filter here, and we were able to just pass in the query string or the param of tag coming through the URL. So pretty cool. Now I want to do the same thing with search. So if I search for something here, I want to be able to find it if it's in the title or description or whatever. So we're actually going to create another scope filter, or not another scope filter, but we're going to add to the current one. Now, before we do that, we have to set this form up. If I put something in here now and search, oh, it actually does show up here, because all we need is for it to show up here. But let me just check the that search form real quick. So if we go to our views, what do we have it in a partial? Yeah, we have it in a partial right here. And I mean action, yeah, it's just going to go to the home page. And you just want to make sure, I mean, if you copied the template, then this should be fine, but you want to make sure that it has a name, because that's what is actually showing up here, the name of search. And it's going to be a GET request by default. We don't have to specify the method. All right, cool. So, I mean, if we search for Laravel, search, and then that's going to show up here. So that we don't have to do anything else to that. What we do have to do is in our controller, this is actually going to be pretty simple as far as the controller, because with this request now, we can just pass in addition to tag, we can pass in search. Save that, and now let's go into our model where we have our scope filter, and we're pretty much going to do the same thing. Let's copy this. And now on filters, we should also have search. Okay, or we shouldn't, you know, if we submit the form, we should have a search on it, and this should be available. Then we want to do query where, and then decide where do we want to actually search for this search term. So let's say for the title, so title, and it's going to be a like, so we'll say like request search, because that's what we're matching. And I do want to look in other fields as well, not just the title. So what we can do is add on to this. I'm going to go on the next line here, and let's say or where. And in here, let's look in the description. I'm just going to actually copy this and paste that in, and let's say description. Okay, so it's going to search description for the search term, and then we'll do one more or where. So I'll just copy that, go on the next line here, paste that in, and we'll do the tags as well. So if you type something in and it matches one of the tags, and that should actually do it. So let's save that. Let's just clear this out for now. And then let's grab a word, one of these dummy words. So we have Nemo here. Let's type that in. So Nemo, and let's search. And there we go, Nemo. Now it must be somewhere else in here too. Remember, it searches the description. So if we click in here, we should see Nemo somewhere in here. Just search for it, Nemo. Yep, there it is. All right, so if you type something in and it matches either the title, description, or the tags, if I search for view, that should show me this one because I am searching for the tags. And if you want to add another field here to search for, that's absolutely fine. All right, so I mean, I think it's really cool how freaking easy this is. If you try to do this with a minimalist framework, I mean, it's definitely not as easy, especially when you're dealing with SQL queries and stuff. Now, another thing that I wanted to do is install something called Clockwork, which you can install with Composer, and then you also need the Chrome extension. So let's grab the Chrome extension first. So Clockwork. And the reason I like this is because it can show you the exact queries that are being run. Let's say Clockwork Chrome. It's also available for Firefox if you're using Firefox. All right, so I actually already have it installed, but you can go ahead and install that. And then we want to install it into our project with Composer. So let's say Composer require, shoot, I forget what the package is called. Let's just say Laravel Clockwork. It's going d/clockwork. All right, it's going d/clockwork. You don't have to do this. It's just a nice little tool. All right, so now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up my DevTools. And let's see, should I put them